Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, April 28th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about Representative Tim Ryan, someone who ran for president in the 2020 election that is now announcing that he is running for United States Senate in the state of Ohio. And I think that this is a pretty important announcement, one that we really should be covering, given that Ohio might end up being competitive in the 2022 midterm elections. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that a Democrat is going to win this Senate race. All I'm going to point out is the fact that it could be competitive and that Tim Ryan announcing this Senate campaign might actually add to it. I think this could really come down to a centrist Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden-esque Democrat versus a Trump Republican, that being Josh Mandel, the candidate who ran for Senate before and lost back in 2012, and then ran again in 2018, and then withdrew from the race citing family reasons, and then it ended up being a whole relationship issue with his wife, and then now he's back in the bid for United States Senate, and he's taking a complete turn in favor of President Trump's direction, sort of fishing and fiending for the endorsement of the former president, because it comes down to on the Republican side, whoever is endorsed by President Trump. But for Tim Ryan, he's probably going to walk into this Ohio Senate race and end up winning. Not in the regular election, let me rephrase, end up winning this primary. I think he is the front runner in the Democratic primary as of right now, especially since some more notable names, a lot of them actually, have declined to run in this Senate race. I think largely because they don't want to lose. So, with Tim Ryan making this announcement, let's do a little bit of history and talking just a little bit about why Ohio is even under consideration. Well, when you look 6 years ago relative to 2022, Rob Portman was the incumbent Republican who won re-election in the state of Ohio. Now, if you look at that margin, it's absolutely astounding. Ted Strickland is someone who had won in a statewide election before, so facing off against Rob Portman probably should not have gone as poorly as it actually did. This margin of victory for Rob Portman was 20.8%. How embarrassing for the Democratic candidate. I mean, 20.8% sort of tells us that there's that 12% out of the total vote that were Clinton voters that also voted for Rob Portman. Isn't that interesting? So there's a lot of crossover vote in the Ohio Senate race, and the presidential result wasn't too pretty for the Democratic Party either. It was a state that Barack Obama had won in the 2012 election, which I can show you right now. Obama won the state by nearly 2 points, 1.9% to be exact. Nothing solid, but all signs had indicated really that Ohio might be a state that is competitive. Well, then roll around 2016, and it was largely expected to be competitive, potentially even a Hillary Clinton victory, and yet Donald Trump won the state by nearly 9 points. Actually, we're talking about a margin here, not nearly 9, around 8 points here, but that's still a very large margin for the, not at the time the president, but, for President Trump, 8.1% in favor of him. And that was something that really altered the direction of Ohio politics, potentially for the next couple of years, maybe even the next decade or two. President Trump had a resounding effect on the state of Ohio that will continue on with Republican victories over the next few years, which I found to be very interesting, that Trump was able to take these white working class voters, take the voters in the Rust Belt and say, you are no longer Democrats. You are no longer voting for Obama, for Kerry, for Gore, for Clinton even. And he said, now you are voting Republican, and that's exactly what they did. In 2016, they reelected the Republican senator, and then roll around 2020, Ohio doesn't get any bluer. No, seriously. The margin of victory for Trump in the 2020 election was 7.1%. So 8.1%. So the shift was less than 0.01%. It was not a shift. It was not a shift at all. It was a very incremental move towards the left, very incremental at that, nothing significant. It was an 8.1% margin in 2020, 8.1% margin in 2016. So despite Joe Biden doing better in the entire region, with the exception of Ohio being that only exception, I find that to be another thing contributing to why Ohio is a state the Democratic Party isn't too confident in, but this is a reason why I'm about to show you in just a second why the Democratic Party might actually look at Ohio and say, well, maybe it's reachable. It depends on the year. And I disagree with that. But I've seen it in an argument recently that Sherrod Brown winning by 6 points is this indicator that Ohio is a state that can vote for a Democrat by a large margin. Now, Sherrod Brown was running against Jim Renacci, I think it's Renacci. I just remember pronouncing that name 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. But pretty much, Sherrod Brown was supposed to win this Senate race. He won it by a likely margin. I expected him to win by a likely margin, and he did it. However, the margin was closer. It was closer down to the lean margin than it was to being in the safe margin. And his opponent largely did not campaign for it as much as Josh Mandel did in the past. What we saw on the Republican side was practically the race being given up, not nearly as invested in as surrounding races. Even Indiana, a state that was largely in favor of the president back in 2016 compared to Ohio, but more money and more time was spent on Indiana than it was on Ohio, because Ohio wasn't necessarily deemed as winnable for the GOP because of Sherrod Brown's popularity. When the Morning Consult polls released that showed Sherrod Brown up double digits, no one really assumes that that's a competitive incumbent. Well, the same thing actually happened for Ted Cruz down in Texas. The Republican Party neglected the state. Ted Cruz was up 11, 13 points in terms of overall approval, but ended up only winning by less than 3 points. So, of course, exceptions happen and, things happen around the country. But the major point is, while this was an impressive 6-point victory, his Republican opponent wasn't nearly as strong as it could have been. And the election could have been much, much closer. I'm not entirely sure if Sherrod Brown would have lost, but I don't think that this one election, this one exception, should be this indicator that the state is still going to be at least somewhat favored for the Democrats in 2022. The reality of the state of Ohio is that the last time it voted for a Democrat on the presidential level was in 2012, and it wasn't even by a large margin. Neither was 2008. It was not by nearly as large as 8.1%, and that happened twice with President Trump. Twice. And if you're looking at the competitive states, a lot more money is going to be focused on Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, not necessarily Ohio. While the Democratic Party would love to have Ohio, there's nothing really telling us that the Democratic Party is going to be the favorite to win this race. They might be the favorite in Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, depending on the situation with the incumbent. Pennsylvania potentially right now. Wisconsin, it depends on whether or not Ron Johnson actually runs for United States Senate. He hasn't officially announced whether he is or isn't. But with this Tim Ryan announcement in Ohio, I think this also circles back to the argument that I made with Joe Cunningham in the state of South Carolina. While we probably won't see a Democrat win in South Carolina simply because it is South Carolina, we probably won't see Tim Ryan win in Ohio simply because it is Ohio. But the Democratic Party has a strong candidate. Tim Ryan, on his own, I will say, is probably one of the stronger Democratic names that I see here floated for a potential Democratic bid. I mean, other than Amy Acton, who is the former director of the Ohio Department of Health, rose to popularity amongst the general public across the nation, actually, I would say. Many people who are involved with elections did think that she would have a pretty good shot at winning the Senate race. Tim Ryan announced he's a representative in Ohio. And amongst those, who are the rest, I will say that Tim Ryan probably is the strongest one we've seen so far, the most recognizable, and the one who has actually gotten some pretty strong endorsements so far. I mean, if you're looking at the endorsements, he has 3 from, Ohio representatives, former and current. You also have Ted Strickland, the former governor of Ohio, the one who did lose against Rob Portman in this exact Senate race, so he's not running. You have Hillary Clinton, and you have a number of state representatives and mayors. So a lot of top names and a lot of local names as well endorsing Tim Ryan pretty much tells us that he has a lot of the energy, a lot of the Democratic support. That's why I view him as the frontrunner, especially since his only other formidable opponent was Amy Acton, and she's not even running. Well, it's probably going to be pretty solid for Tim Ryan at this point. But then moving into the general election, why is Tim Ryan running if all of the pundits believe that the GOP is going to win? Personally speaking, I expect the GOP to win. Tim Ryan might be a good candidate for the Democratic side, but why are they running him if he's just going to lose? Well, first things first, Tim Ryan is likely doing this just so he has something to run for. Ohio is actually losing an electoral vote after the 2020 census, which means it's losing a congressional district. Well, the first person that comes to mind in terms of being ousted in the United States House of Representatives from Ohio, because Republicans have full control over the redistricting process in Ohio, they are going to get rid of Tim Ryan. They are going to get rid of his district. He's not running for Senate because he thinks he'll lose in the House. He'd have an easier chance in a safe blue district than he would in a likely Republican state for obvious reasons. But if you're looking at why, number one, he's losing his district. So he has nothing to run for. So why not run for Senate? Number two, I think this goes to the point that Tim Ryan is a strong candidate, at least mildly. Again, I don't think he's going to win. I don't want anyone to misconstrue this and say, I believe Tim Ryan is going to win the primary. I don't. Win the general. I don't. But what I do think is that he is providing the Democratic Party an opportunity to vote for a recognizable candidate, to vote for a serious candidate rather than a sacrificial lamb. The method and strategy that the Democratic Party needs to implement around the nation is that they need to run strong candidates no matter whether they think that they will win or lose. Because even though they won't win that Senate race, that state Senate race, that state House race, that regular House race or regular Senate race, they need someone. They need to give the people someone to vote for. You see, the thing about the Democratic Party, I will say, that they have been sort of realizing now is that they don't field the best candidates in every single race because some of them are deemed unwinnable. And I can understand not wanting to spend money. That makes sense. But when you have a candidate who doesn't even show his face, doesn't have any rallies, doesn't have a working website, doesn't really care about the Senate race, all because pundits 2 years out are telling you that's not going to be a winnable race, people will rarely have someone to believe in, rarely have someone to turn out to vote for. If you want repetitive turnout, you need a strong candidate on every single ballot. You can't expect minority voters, which already don't vote at a high amount, to be inspired to vote for a no-name Democratic candidate. You need someone who can inspire the base. You need someone who can actually bring out voters. Because while it may not be a winning victory, it takes time. You need to build the foundation. You're not going to get this all at once, which is why the Democratic Party has largely faltered in a number of these states that should be winnable by demographics, should be winnable by the overall composition of party in some of these states. When you look at states with large minority populations that aren't even competitive for the Democratic Party, you have to recognize that sometimes you need people on the ballot that actually inspire the voters. And while Tim Ryan in himself isn't necessarily awe-inspiring or charismatic, Donald Trump type of Democrat, or really just a Bernie Sanders type of Democrat that can bring out massive crowds, I do think he provides the seriousness and the commitment to the Senate race that you probably wouldn't see had the Democratic Party just asked, which statewide official is going to be our sacrificial lamb? Which person wants their name on the ballot knowing that they have no chance of winning this Senate race? And the thing is, Ohio isn't exactly as far out of reach as one might think. While I don't think the Democratic Party is going to win here, the numbers aren't telling us it's completely horrible. When you look at the head-to-head matchups between Josh Mandel, Jane Timken, and then J.D. Vance between Tim Ryan, the numbers aren't exactly that bad. While the rankings, lean R, solid R, likely R, do differ, I will say it's closer to around being likely. And I do think Tim Ryan is going to lose, but I think he's certainly going to focus a lot of time and effort on this race where another candidate might not. And with this canvassing effort, with this get out the vote campaign, even for a losing campaign, getting people registered, getting people out to vote can encourage more and more people, familiarizing them with the voting system, the new one that's just been implemented by the laws being passed in Ohio. So many things need to be done now. And if people don't really care about the election because the Democratic Party isn't nominating someone strong, because I'm not mentioning the Republican Party because they're the shoo-in. I'll talk about Josh Mandel in just a moment. But they are the shoo-in for this race, so it's on the Democrats to keep their base inspired despite this race being understood that the Republicans will win it. But getting these voters registered, getting them out to vote will familiarize them with the voting system, make them more likely to vote in the future. Otherwise, you're just not really focusing on the Senate race at all. So Tim Ryan's announcement, I think, will be beneficial for the Democrats in the long run. While not immediately beneficial, not immediately enough to win the state, it will help. It will help in the eventual future. And also for Josh Mandel, he is currently the front runner in this race. He is getting 38% of the vote. This is from a Republican internal, and it's in the Republican side, so it sort of makes sense. But the main thing is that Josh Mandel is probably going to be the nominee. And, while there could be some surprises, and it really depends on who's getting that full-on Trump endorsement, I can tell you now, Josh Mandel has a number of endorsements already. He has Mike Lee, a senator from Utah. He has a representative, and also he has name recognition. Because if you go back, and let's see if we can pull up the map here in 2012. Let's see if we can pull up Ohio. He ran in the Senate race and got 45% of the vote. So if you're looking at 2012, on the same ballot as, Romney, Mandel did nearly as well. And he has that name recognition. He's been on the ballot before. And he also was a statewide official before. So he's someone who isn't necessarily new to Ohio politics at all. But we will see what happens. We will see who the Republican nominee is, who the Democratic nominee is. Right now, based off this announcement from Tim Ryan, I think this is largely going to be a moral victory type of campaign, a campaign that's centered on actually getting voters out there and inspiring voters and winning over some voters and potentially trying to win. I don't think Tim Ryan is going to completely give up, because that would also be something bad. You just don't have any drive, any commitment once you give up fully. But I will say that the Democratic Party isn't stupid. They will go into this race knowing that they are not going to be the favorites to win this race for months, potentially throughout the entire thing. And they could become the underdogs and eventually win in a shock to the nation. But chances are this victory will largely be a moral one, but will have benefits down the road for the Democratic Party. And that's my main takeaway from Representative Tim Ryan's announcement that he's running for United States Senate in Ohio. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.